Hey!
An elderly Chinese woman shouted. I sighed deeply. I already knew what she was going to say. This had been my life since the day I was born. This old Asian woman had been staring hard at my face since she saw me. This was the usual sign when an Asian person was trying to figure out if I was Asian or not. Being biracial in the Asian community was not easy. Asians are very cultural and traditional. My very existence was a reminder that some Asians went against those cultural traditions. Some looked at me like I was a weird science experiment. Others were disgusted by me. Most only saw the black in me. I hated going to Asian stores or joining my mother in her community. The black community was not much better as far as accepting biracial people. My father left me and my mother years ago. I still talked to him, but he had not been active in my life. His side of the family only saw the Chinese in me. They found it hilarious when someone called me Blackie Chan. They all seemed to have the exact same jokes. It was almost like they all had a hive mind when it came to colorism and racist jokes, as if they all read the same I hate biracials playbook. I swear each time a black person said that racist joke, they thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Between being sexually harassed by black men or hated on by black women, I would choose the more subtle racism of the Asian community. I was called the occasional name or avoided like I was carrying the plague. But the black community was in your face about it. They hated you like they were the black version of the KKK. I hated going to black communities. Black men stared at me like they wanted to kidnap and rape me. I felt like a piece of meat. They were overly aggressive, and when I denied them or completely ignored them, they took it personally. Their desire and lust for me dissipated, and I was now a stuck-up Chinese bitch. I guess I didn't fit in anywhere, really. I found myself alone a lot. I enjoyed my own company. There was peace in not having to answer questions about what I was mixed with.
Hey, you girl!
The elderly Chinese lady shouted again. I turned to her with the biggest fake smile I could muster. I bowed slightly to show respect to her as an elder. The elderly lady eyed me closely. Her gaze lingered for long moments on my hair. Hair for all biracials was the giveaway. Even those who could pass for one race or the other could not hide their hair. My hair was not the typical long, straight Asian hair. My hair was alive and bounced with beautiful curls. My hair was one of the things I loved most about being biracial. I could do so many things with it. I only really got to enjoy my hair when I was alone, though. My mother told me to hide my hair when I was in public, so I could look more Asian. My mother loved me, but she felt awkward seeing the clearly African in my hair and the darker tint of my skin. My lips were fuller than most Asian women's. I was taller and much curvier as well.
Are you Chinese?
The elderly lady asked. I bit my lip in frustration. I was so tired of not fitting in, so tired of having my race questioned and not being enough for anybody. As usual, I smiled and nodded. Yes, grandmother, I replied. Of course, this woman was not my grandmother. It was a form of respect to address her as such. The old woman stared at me for a long moment again, almost as if she could not believe that I was Chinese. The old woman shook her head.
Which one of your parents is Chinese?
The old woman asked. None of your business, I wanted to say. But I'd grown accustomed to holding my tongue and just smiling, being passive so as not to cause any more harm to the sensitive Chinese racial norms. I took a deep breath and calmed the rage that was bubbling up inside of me. I have to go, grandmother. Thank you for the honour of your time, I said softly. I turned from the old lady and headed for the cashier. The sooner I could pay for my stuff and be away from the Chinese and the cultural racist nonsense, the better. Not all Chinese were like this. The American-born Chinese were way more accepting, and I loved hanging with them. They were Americanized and couldn't care less for the social nonsense of China. To the American-born Chinese, I was just another Chinese American. It felt amazing to fit in somewhere. I've yet to find another half-black, half-Chinese person like myself. I've found a lot of half-black and white people. I enjoy speaking with them, but it's not the same. They mostly whine about American racism, and most have some racist complex that everything is the white man's fault. Our struggles were different. Chinese actually had a culture and valued family, something that I found greatly lacking in American people. The half-white and black biracials were no different, in my opinion. I would enjoy talking to them from time to time. It was an escape from the constant judgment of everyone else. We bonded on just being mixed race and not fitting in. We were the misfits of society, and there was some peace in that shared struggle. The old woman grabbed the back of my slender arm, interrupting my musing. She was surprisingly strong. I felt her grip tighten as I tried to pull away. I didn't want to pull away too hard and cause the old woman to fall over. I would never hear the end of it. The headline in the Chinese society would be, "Mixed race demon attacks elder." The Chinese were very protective of each other and their way of life. It would no doubt cause even more shame on my mother and maybe even violence. I stopped and turned to the old woman, who glared at me. "Which one of your parents broke tradition and procreated with a black demon?" the old Chinese woman asked. Her voice never changed. She still had the voice of a sweet old Chinese lady as she said those hateful things. I looked to the cashier for help. He heard what was going on. He was Chinese as well. He was an immigrant. He was loath to get in between me and the elder. He probably figured I deserved whatever I was getting from her. "Elder, please, I have to go," I said. I gently tried to pull my arm away from her, but she squeezed harder. I winced in pain. "You're not Chinese. You're a demon who has stolen the blood of my people. Why are you in our store, demon? Can't we have anything?" the old Chinese woman asked. I was so tired of being judged and harassed because my parents didn't live up to the traditional and racial norms of not only the Chinese, but also the black community. I was judged everywhere I went. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside of me. I was exhausted from constantly beating it down and smiling in the face of those who hated me. I had enough. I yanked my arm forcefully, causing the old woman to stumble. "I'm no demon, old woman. This is not your country, it's mine. I was born here. If you don't like seeing mixed-race people, then take your old racist ass back to China," I raged at the old woman. Now the cashier came from behind the counter and rushed over to help the elder. "You're right, elder. I'm not Chinese. I'm not black. I'm somewhere in the middle of both. But I am tired of the abuse," I shouted. I did not realize that I was crying. All the pain of those countless years of holding this in, of smiling and nodding as they berated me for being born, as they called me a curse, a stain on the Chinese, as they cursed my mother for having the gall to love a man other than Chinese. They never once thought that maybe my mother wanted to escape the oppressive ways of Chinese men, that my mother wanted to be a wife and not the slave of her Chinese husband. "You can't speak to a Chinese elder like that," the Chinese cashier chastised. I was not having any of it today. I was tired of being chastised for just existing. "So you finally grow some balls. Where were you when she assaulted me? Should I call the police and get her old Chinese ass locked up?" I shouted angrily. A crowd was starting to form. The Chinese cashier's face paled as I threatened to call the police. For that old woman had assaulted me. "The council will hear about this. You'll bring shame on your family," the cashier said calmly. I glared at him. "The council is for Chinese immigrants. As you all have made abundantly clear, I am not Chinese, nor am I an immigrant, so fuck your council," I shouted back. The cashier helped the elder woman to her feet. The crowd of Chinese whispered and stared at me. I could see the anger and malice in their eyes for me. I don't know why I even tried to fit into this hideous racist culture. Of course, there were many beautiful and amazing things about being Chinese, but I'd never got to experience them. My racial mix always got in the way. I was always excluded or felt so uncomfortable because of the stares and questions that I intentionally avoided big crowds of Chinese. The cashier coddled the elderly Chinese woman like she was a child. He patted her old, wrinkled hand. After he was certain that she was okay, he turned to me.
"Leave my store. You're not welcome here,"
the cashier demanded. He pointed at the door. I sighed and looked at him and the crowd of Chinese that had stopped to see what the commotion was. I shook my head. "I don't feel like I was ever welcomed here," I replied. I turned and faced the small but growing throng of Chinese that had entered the store. "I'm half Chinese and half black. You all should be ashamed for your racism and for how you've treated me," I accused them all. My voice cracked. I could not hide the emotion that bubbled up. I was so angry and so frustrated with the constant bigotry. The crowd whispered among themselves as I walked past them. The items that I was going to buy I placed on the checkout counter and left. It felt good to stand up to them. I felt empowered. I felt like I'd finally put them in their place. As good as I felt, I regretted it though. I knew my mother would suffer because of this. I knew the council would punish her in some way. My mother was trying to cling to the old Chinese traditions so she could be accepted back into her community. She hoped to find a good Chinese man to marry her. She was holding on to a dream. No Chinese man would marry her after she'd been with a black man. They felt blacks were demons. Big, dark-skinned, violent brutes. Her womb had birthed a half-demon in their eyes. She was doomed to be just as much of an outcast as I was. My arm still hurt as I walked home. I'd probably have a bruise there. I was nearly a mile away from the store, but I could still feel the judgmental eyes boring into my back. I didn't understand the hate people had for biracial individuals. We didn't choose to be born this way. Most of us would probably choose anything but to be biracial if given the option. For some reason, society blamed us for existing, but absolved those who created us. How were we to blame while our parents, who had bitten the forbidden fruit, were free from fault? My mother was an outcast from the community she had chosen to stay in, because they knew her, and by extension, me. But she could move to a new Chinese community where no one knew of her past with my father, where she could start fresh. I blamed myself for my mother's suffering. She loved me and wouldn't abandon me, no matter how miserable it made her. I often wondered if she hated me or regretted having me. Her life would have been so much easier if she had just left me at a fire station. Some family would have taken me in, and she could have restarted her life. My mother was honourable, always speaking of the importance of honouring one's elders and ancestors. She would not dishonour them by abandoning her child. The blood of her ancestors ran in my veins, and she feared their judgment more than the racism of the community she lived in. I hated what my existence had put her through. Like me, she just wanted acceptance. But unlike me, she could get that back. I never had it and never would. I knew my mother would pay for what happened today. I only hoped they'd go easy on her. My heart raced as I neared my mother's house. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She owned it outright, having worked tirelessly to stake her claim here in America. Her family had lost everything in China due to the civil conflicts against the government. She rarely spoke of those times, but I knew they weighed heavily on her and shaped the way she lived now. My mother often had nightmares. She would wake up drenched in sweat and trembling. I wondered what she dreamed about, but I could never find the courage to ask her. The haunted look in her eyes was enough for me to respect her silence. "Ma, I'm home!" I called out as I entered the house. My mother didn't answer, which was strange. She always waited by the door, smiling. I loved my mother. She was my anchor in a world that wanted to throw me away simply for being mixed. She was a warrior who kept the wolves at bay. It would break my heart if she were disappointed in me. I walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting at the table, her head resting on it. By the way her back heaved, I could tell she was crying. "Ma?" I started. She held up her hand, taking several deep breaths to calm herself, before turning to me. My mother was still very pretty and well kept for her age. She could easily find a husband who would love and care for her. but the hardness in her eyes obscured the beauty and youth she still possessed. This world had chewed her up and spit her out. I, her half-black daughter, was all she had left. Just as she was my anchor in a positive way, I was hers, but in a way that dragged her down and threatened to drown her.
"What happened at the store, Hunksy?"
my mother asked, her voice cracking with emotion. I'd never seen her like this. I knew word travelled fast in our small community, but I had left the store less than an hour ago.
"An elder attacked me for being half-black,"
I started, but my mother held up her hand and took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. She wrung her hands and stared off into the distance, physically here but mentally far away.
"My biggest regret, Hunksy, is meeting your father. Not because I regret having you, beloved."
My mother paused, looking at me with tears and love in her eyes. I couldn't help but cry with her. Seeing my mother, as strong as she was, break down like this, shattered me in ways I couldn't put into words.
"It's because of how backward the thinking of my people is,"
my mother continued, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She took several deep breaths as I walked over and hugged her. She patted my hand, not inquiring further about what had happened at the store. She had been fighting my battles against the bigotry of the Chinese community since the day she met my father. My mother had sacrificed so much for love. She would have fought the world for my father. She loved him dearly. It broke her heart when he abandoned her, leaving her to fend for herself in a world he had turned upside down. She had made herself a pariah in her own community for the sake of his love. Like so many others, he got what he wanted and left her with a broken heart and a child. My father was a fool for leaving a woman as loyal and beautiful as my mother.
"The council called me. I have to kick you out or we both leave. So I'll pack our things and see if I can sell the house,"
my mother said. I didn't understand how they could make her leave. She owned this house outright. She'd worked herself nearly to death for years to pay it off. They couldn't just kick her out. "You own this house, Ma. They can't kick you out," I said. My mother shook her head.
"They've put a lien on the house and can foreclose on it. It was part of the contract I signed when agreeing to come here. I have to abide by the council,"
she replied. I sighed. This was just a way for the council to extort poor Chinese immigrants. I couldn't let them kick my mother out. This was her life. She had poured so many years of tears and hard work into owning this house. I decided then that I would leave. I didn't know where I would go, but I couldn't stay. I had always been a burden on my mother, and the thought of her having to start over because of me was something my heart couldn't bear. "Don't pack, Ma," I said. My mother turned and looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. I couldn't hide anything from her. How could I? I came from her. She gave birth to me and raised me. She knew me better than I knew myself.
"I won't allow it, Hunksy,"
my mother said. She knew what I was planning. To leave so she could keep the house, so she wouldn't have to start over again. Besides, I was nearly an adult, and I wanted to leave this wretched community anyway. I was tired of being here, tired of being the daughter of a black demon. This community was a prison to me, and I would gladly leave it to save my mother from losing everything she had worked for. My mother started to cry again, and I couldn't help but cry with her. I'd never been without her. I didn't know how I would live or eat. But after all my mother had endured, this was the least I could do for her. My mixed blood had weighed her down so much. She deserved to be free of me. She deserved to find love and restart her life.
"There is no life and no home without you in it, Hunksy,"
my mother said. She hugged me tightly as she sobbed into my chest. I was already much taller than her. The strong, powerful woman I loved and adored felt like a fragile child in my arms. I kissed her on the top of her head, just as she had done for me countless times.
"I want to go, Ma. I hate it here." Let me do this for both of us? I pleaded with her. I knew what I was asking would be hard for her. I was her only family here. She had raised me alone, and I was asking her to part with her heart, to wonder how she could live without it. My mother was my heart too. I would go to the ends of the earth and back for her. There was nothing I could do or give her that could repay all that she had done for me. Even if I tried, she would never accept it. My mother pulled away and cupped my face with her small hands, smiling proudly at me. I left home around your age too. I was dreading this day, but I'm proud that you are more like me than your father, my mother said. She let go of me and hurried out of the kitchen. I sat down at the table, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I was really going to leave. I was going to be homeless to save my mother and free myself from the bigoted, oppressive culture of my Chinese half. As brave as I made myself sound, I was scared. I'd always had my mum and this house. No matter how bad or hard a day I had, my mother and her home had always been my refuge. My mother returned with an old lockbox, setting it down on the table before unlocking it. Inside were several stacks of different currencies. She reached for a stack of hundreds and handed it to me. This is nearly $5,000. I've been saving it for your college. You'll need it now, so take it, she said. Her hand shook as she placed the stack of money in front of me. Ma? I began. She gently patted my hand. What you're doing, Hanxi, is very honourable. I'm so very proud of you and very sad at the same time. Please, beloved, take the money. At least I'll know you won't be cold or hungry, my mother said, her voice cracking with pain. The thought of me being on my own was hard for her. She wasn't ready for me to leave. Seeing the pain in her eyes made me hate the Chinese community even more. It made me wish I wasn't the daughter of a black man. My father had caused so much pain and hardship for both of us. I hated him just as much as I hated the Chinese community. How could he be such a coward? How could he abandon my mother and me to face the anti-black racism of the Chinese community? He, of all people, should have known how other races viewed black people. In my eyes, he was heartless and the worst kind of coward. To leave your flesh and blood in the hands of racists was as unforgivable as it was pathetic. I sighed deeply and placed the money in my purse. I was going to leave tonight. If I didn't, I knew I wouldn't be able to. My mother's home and security depended on me leaving a community that hated me for being a half-breed and shunned my mother for having me. I tried to force a smile on my face, despite my heartbreak. I didn't want my mother to see how truly scared I was to be in the world alone. I was like a prisoner who hated prison and longed for freedom, but had been in prison so long that the thought of freedom terrified me, because I had no clue how to survive on my own, how to exist outside the walls I both hated and loved. "I'm sorry, Ma," I said. My mother looked confused. "For what, beloved?" she asked. "For being born like this," I replied. I shivered as I stepped out into the cold. I didn't know where I was going, but I was doing this. I wouldn't let my mother suffer because of me any more. I waited for my mother to fall asleep. It never took long. She always worked hard and was constantly tired. I covered her slender form with a blanket and quietly left. I had packed my bags earlier, just a single suitcase on wheels. For the first time in my life, I was truly homeless. I didn't know where my next meal would come from, or where I would lay my head. All that mattered was that my mother's home was safe, that she wouldn't have to start over. I could never repay her for all that she'd given me and sacrificed for me, but this was a start. I walked down the streets slowly, taking in the buildings and homes of old Chinatown. The more I walked, the more I realized I wouldn't miss this place. I grew up here, but I hated it. This place had been unkind to me and my mother. Tears welled up and clouded my vision. "Don't cry, Hunksy," I told myself. "These people in this place weren't worth my tears." As much as I tried to fight them, the tears stubbornly fell anyway. Maybe my soul needed to cry, to release the pent-up pain and rage that had tormented me for years. I wiped the tears from my cheeks and kept walking. It was past 1 a.m, and I had no clue where I was going. I had some money, but I didn't want to waste it all on hotels. I sighed, knowing I'd have to call him. I didn't want to. I didn't remember him at all, nor had I seen a recent picture of him. But what other option did I have? I stared at old Chinatown for a moment longer and continued walking, wrapping my jacket around me tighter. What would I say to him? My first conversation with him after nearly 20 years of silence would be asking for help. He did owe me. He'd been absent my entire life. Would he see it that way? Did he even think of me? Did he not wonder how his daughter, whom he'd never met, was doing? Then again, if he didn't care enough to be in my life, why would he care enough to think about me? I sighed and sat on a bench, watching the fog of my breath in the cold night air. My heart raced. I had his number for a long time. I knew where he lived and followed him on Facebook. He had a whole new family and kids. He seemed happy without me and my mother, as if he had erased our existence and pain from his memory. He didn't know I followed him. I'd never had the courage to reach out. Why should I? He was my father and had abandoned me. He should be begging to be in my life, not me begging to be in his. My hand shook as I pressed his contact photo on my phone. It was past 1 a.m. I didn't know if he would answer. I hoped he would. His social media said he worked hospital security at night. The phone rang several times, and each ring made me feel like I was going to have a heart attack. "Hello?" A man's voice finally answered. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there for a moment. It was really him. My father, whom I'd never met, was on the phone. "Hello? Hello?" the man said again, his tone irritated. I still couldn't find the words to say anything. "I can hear you breathing, you fucking weirdo," he said. I took a deep breath. "Dad?" I said. It felt strange to say that. My entire life I'd never called anyone Dad. Now here I was talking to my father for the first time, and all I could say was, "Dad?" The man was silent for a moment. He seemed lost in thought, as if trying to figure out which kid was calling him. I knew he didn't recognize my voice. "Who is this?" he asked. My whole body shook. It was cold outside, but the chill I felt wasn't from the weather. "It's Hunksy, Dad," I replied. I could hear the cracks in my voice. I was trying hard to control my emotions, but I was losing that battle. "Hunksy?" he repeated, sounding confused. I could tell he was searching his memory, trying to place my name and recall the face of the woman he had broken. It pained me to know that I wasn't even an afterthought to him. My mother had loved this man so much, had destroyed her life for him, and he couldn't even remember her name. My mother still loved this man. If he showed up at her doorstep, she'd take him in like nothing had happened, like he hadn't abandoned her with a child for nearly 20 years. "Ah, how are you?" he said awkwardly, as if only just remembering who I was. "I'm okay, Dad," I said. There was a moment of silence. We were both trying to figure out what to say next. I didn't feel right asking this man for anything. He hadn't even remembered that I existed. He'd stopped caring about me the moment he walked away. "I'm sorry for calling," I said, breaking the silence. I could hear him sigh deeply. I didn't want to hear anything he had to say. His excuses would only anger me. I hung up the phone. It was clear that he had never thought about me, never wondered how I was. He'd moved on with his life. I had meant nothing to him. My phone rang. He was calling me back. I declined the call and sent him a text message. I wasn't ready to talk to him. He would have to understand that. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. "Damn it!" I sighed. Hot tears rolled down my cheeks. He didn't deserve these tears. I stood up and started to walk again. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to walk. How could he just forget about me? I asked myself. Maybe he hated me because I was half Chinese. He clearly loved his other kids. He treated them well and took them on vacations. He was happily married and enjoying his life, while I was forgotten, like the woman he had abandoned. Was he a deadbeat? He took care of his other kids. He seemed like an amazing father. It was just me he didn't want or love. That made the pain worse. He was capable of being a good father. He just chose not to when it came to me. I didn't bother to wipe the tears that fell freely. I didn't know why I stalked his page. I often imagined being one of his other kids. I dreamed that I was on vacation with him, that he loved me like he loved them. I had to stop this. I had to let him go. He'd clearly let me go a long time ago. I was so lost in my thoughts that I lost track of time and direction. I had no clue where I was. Everything looked run down. Most of the houses were abandoned, and there were several vacant lots filled with trash. It started to rain. I looked up into the night sky and sighed. My first night on my own, and I was cold and lost in the rain. I had no idea where I was. "Fuck!" I screamed. I didn't care if anyone heard me. I doubted anyone did. I looked around for a place to get out of the rain. My suitcase had wheels, but it wasn't rainproof. I spotted a big red sign that read, "Mama's Soul Food." Next to it was a small nook that was out of the rain. I ran to it and sat down. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. My head hurt. When people spoke of having a broken heart, it was always about emotional pain. They never told you that a truly broken heart makes your entire chest ache. I pulled out a small blanket from my suitcase, leaned against the wall, and laid my suitcase flat next to me. I stared at the bright red sign and thought about my mother. I missed her. I knew she was asleep, and it would be hard for her when she woke up and discovered I was gone. "Oh, child," I heard a voice say. I didn't remember falling asleep, but clearly I had. I was exhausted. "You okay, baby?" the woman's voice asked. I opened my eyes suddenly. I was afraid. I'd never been on the streets before, let alone slept on them. "Don't be startled, child. You hungry?" the woman asked. She had a kind, motherly voice. I didn't know why, but I started to cry. It had only been a night, but I missed my mother dearly. The woman was black, heavy-set and elderly. She leaned down and hugged me. "It's okay, honey. Don't cry," she said, patting me on the back. I couldn't help but let it all out. She was kind and the shoulder I needed. "You're gonna feel better after this, baby. Trust me. A good cry is the soul's way of cleaning itself," the woman said, her voice carrying a deep southern accent. After a moment of holding me as I sobbed like a baby in her arms, I remembered she was a stranger and pulled away. I'm sorry," I stammered. The woman looked offended. "No need to be sorry. My shoulders are strong, and many have cried on them," she replied. I quickly folded up my blanket and put it back in my suitcase. I was embarrassed. "Don't go rushing off yet, sweetie. Help me open up my kitchen and get you something to eat, she said. I was hungry, but I was still hesitant. Crying on these old shoulders is not free now, the woman said, her warm smile melting my heart. I nodded and waited as she fumbled with the keys to her restaurant. I take it you're Mama, I asked, pointing to the big red sign. The woman nodded and smiled. I've been here since I was about your age, the woman replied. She found the right key and opened the door. She hurried in and turned on the lights. I followed behind her, thankful for the warmth. Her restaurant had the look of an old 60s diner. It felt like going to your grandmother's house, knowing she had something amazing cooking in the oven. This place felt like home. Have a seat here, the woman said, pointing to a booth. I need about 30 minutes to get us a good meal going. The bathroom is down the hall. Go wash up. I didn't know why, but I felt comfortable with this elderly black woman. I smiled at her. Thank you, I said. The older woman smiled back at me. I want to hear your story over a good southern breakfast, she said. I nodded. I owed her that. The portly and kind black woman studied Hunksy as she ate, her gaze lingering on the slight slant of Hunksy's big, dark eyes and the loose curls of her hair. You're mixed, ain't you? The woman asked. Hunksy sighed. She couldn't understand why everyone was so fascinated with mixed people. Wasn't it obvious that she was neither fully Chinese nor black? That she was something in between? She had a bit of her Chinese mother and some of her deadbeat black father. Hunksy's frustration was obvious. She nodded as she continued to eat. The older woman frowned. I meant no offense, darling. You're beautiful. I was just trying to figure out how such beauty was created, she said with a smile. Hunksy paused between bites, feeling bad for being frustrated with this kind woman. I knew a mixed boy once, the woman said, her eyes staring off into nothing, lost in a memory that seemed to pain her. He had that same look of pain in his eyes. She reached forward and gently grabbed Hunksy's hand. You ain't thinking of going to see sweet Jesus, are you? The woman asked. It took Hunksy a moment to piece together what she meant. She couldn't deny that the thought had crossed her mind more than once. She felt like a stray dog that no one wanted, the ugly duckling from the old children's books, except that there was no growing up and becoming a swan at the end of her story. Hunksy didn't know how to answer. She had often wished she were dead. The old woman patted her hand. I don't know why people mate outside their race. It's always the babies of those unions that suffer, the woman said, standing up and wiping her hands on her apron. The poor mixed boy I knew killed himself. I see that same lost look in your eyes. She picked up her plate, walked across the diner, and disappeared into the kitchen. Being mixed was a curse, like a ball of shit wrapped in a pretty package. The world saw only the package, oblivious to the pain and turmoil lurking within. Hunksy finished her food, grateful for the old woman's kindness. She knew she had to figure out her life. She had to find a place to sleep tonight. She thought about her mother. This would be the first day she could remember waking up without seeing her smiling face. Hunksy's shoulders slumped as she fought back a sob. You okay, child? The kind old woman asked. Hunksy quickly wiped her tears and nodded. I miss my mother, Hunksy said quietly. The old woman sat back down across from her. Why don't you go back home, love? She suggested. Hunksy shook her head. I can't, she replied. The old woman studied her, unsure whether to press the issue, but decided against it. I need some help around here if you're willing, These old big bones of mine can't run this place like they used to, the woman said, looking around and sighing. This place used to be something, child. This place has history and soul. Whatever is ailing you, these old walls and my good cooking will help you heal it. Hunksy glanced around the diner, taking in the faded pictures on the walls, the worn-out seats, and the warmth that seemed to radiate from the old woman's presence. There was something comforting about the place, a quiet resilience that called out to her, offering a small flicker of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. "I don't know," Hunksy muttered, pushing her plate away. She hadn't eaten this much in days, and the food sat heavy in her stomach. "I'm not good at much." The woman chuckled softly, a sound like rolling thunder on a warm summer night. "Oh, honey, you don't have to be good at anything to start. You just have to be willing. And maybe, just maybe, this place can give you something in return." Hunksy stared down at her hands, tracing the lines of her palms as if they held answers she'd been searching for. The old woman's words echoed in her mind. It was always the babies of those unions that suffered. But she didn't want to be a victim of her parents' choices any longer. She needed to find her own path, even if it was one she had to carve out of the mess that was her life. "What do you need help with?" Hunksy finally asked, her voice small and uncertain. The old woman's face lit up with a smile that reached her eyes. "Everything, darling. Cooking, cleaning, serving. This place is a labor of love, but it's hard for these old bones to keep up." Hunksy nodded slowly. She wasn't sure if she could commit to anything, not when she felt so lost and broken, but the offer felt like a lifeline, a tiny thread of connection in a world where she often felt invisible. "I can try," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The old woman reached across the table and squeezed Hunksy's hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "That's all I ask, child. Just try. You might find that this place has a way of mending what's been broken." Hunksy nodded, a lump forming in her throat. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't feel so bleak. A future where she could find some peace, even if it was within the walls of a run-down diner owned by a kind stranger. "Thank you," Hunksy said, her voice cracking. She didn't know if this would be the answer, but it was a start. A small step towards something better, and for now that was enough. The old woman stood, her knees cracking as she did, but she kept her smile steady. "We'll take it one day at a time, sweet girl. You'll see, things can get better. Sometimes all it takes is a little faith and a good meal," she said. The old woman pointed to a door that seemed to barely be on its hinges. The paint was cracked and fading. The knob was rusted. The door looked like it had not been touched in years. "That's your room, darling," the old woman said. Hunksy stared at the door, unsure of whether she would be better off sleeping in some ditch. "It's not much, and it for sure needs some attention, but it has a warm bed, and it's yours if you want it," the old woman said. Hunksy stood and walked over to the door, almost afraid to touch the knob. A soft glow emanated from under the door, warm and welcoming. She took a deep breath and opened it. The room was small but neatly kept. It wasn't the dingy nightmare she had pictured in her mind. The bed was small, with old covers, and there was an aged dresser covered in dust. The walls were bare, the paint peeling and cracked in places. The old woman was right. This room just needed some care. Hunksy smiled. "The bathroom and shower are upstairs," the old woman said, patting her on the shoulder. The months passed slowly, each day blurring into the next, as Hunksy settled into her new life at the diner. The old woman had a gentle way of guiding her without pushing too hard. Together they cooked meals, scrubbed floors, and listened to the old radio that played soulful blues and gospel, filling the diner with a warmth that Hunksy hadn't realized she needed. The old woman never spoke much about her past, and Hunksy didn't pry. But she noticed how the old woman's hands trembled more often, and how she would sometimes clutch her chest, wincing when she thought no one was looking. Hunksy had asked her once if she was okay, but the old woman had just waved her off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the diner in a golden hue, the old woman pulled Hunksy aside. She looked more tired than usual, her once vibrant eyes now dull and clouded. Hunksy could feel the air grow heavy around them, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was to come. "Hunksy, child," the old woman said, her voice rasping with each breath, "I need to tell you something important." Hunksy nodded, her heart thudding in her chest as she sensed the gravity of the moment. The old woman reached into the pocket of her worn apron and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope, handing it to Hunksy with trembling fingers. "I'm not going to be around much longer, sweet girl," the old woman said, her voice cracking. "Cancer's got me. Doctors say it's spread too far. Ain't much they can do now." Hunksy felt the air leave her lungs. She tried to speak, but the words got caught in her throat, tangled up in a mix of sorrow and disbelief. "I've had a good run," the old woman continued, her smile sad and wistful. "This diner, it's been my whole life. It's seen me through the best and worst of times. And now, I want it to be yours." Hunksy stared at the envelope in her hands, the weight of the old woman's words pressing down on her. "I don't know anything about running a diner. I can't—" The old woman cut her off with a gentle squeeze of her arm. "You don't have to know everything, Hunksy. You just have to keep this place going. Keep its heart beating. It's yours now. All of it." Hunksy felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She looked around the diner, at the faded pictures on the walls and the chipped tiles on the floor. She thought about all the quiet moments she'd spent here, finding solace in the clatter of dishes and the smell of the old woman's cooking. This place had become more than just a diner. It was a sanctuary, a refuge from the storm that was her life. "Why me?" Hunksy asked, her voice barely a whisper. The old woman's smile was soft and knowing. "Because, child, you're more than what the world sees. You got a heart that's been hurt, but it's still beating, and that's enough. You're enough." Hunksy nodded, her vision blurred by tears. She clutched the envelope to her chest, feeling the faint beat of her own heart, steady and strong. The old woman leaned back in her chair, her breath shallow but her spirit still fierce. "Promise me, Hunksy. Promise me you'll keep this place alive." Hunksy nodded again, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She wrapped her arms around the old woman, holding onto her tightly, as if she could keep her here just a little longer. "I promise," Hunksy whispered. "I'll take care of it. I'll take care of you." The old woman closed her eyes, a peaceful smile spreading across her face. "That's all I needed to hear, sweet girl. That's all I needed." They sat there in silence, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the diner. Hunksy held the old woman's hand, feeling the frailty of her grip. the warmth slowly fading from her skin. She stayed with her until the last breath left the old woman's body. A quiet release that felt like the soft exhale of a life well lived. Hunksy wiped her tears, her heart aching with a profound sense of loss. But amid the grief, she felt a quiet determination, a resolve to honour the old woman's legacy. The diner was more than just a building. It was a testament to resilience, to love, to the beauty of small, everyday moments. Hunksy stood up, glancing around the diner with new eyes. This place was hers now. It was up to her to keep its heart beating, just as the old woman had asked. She walked to the front door and flipped the sign to closed, taking a moment to breathe in the stillness of the night. As she locked up, Hunksy felt the weight of the future ahead. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone. With the envelope still clutched in her hand, Hunksy stepped out into the cool night air, the stars above her twinkling like tiny beacons of hope. She looked up, feeling a strange sense of comfort, as if the old woman were watching over her, guiding her every step of the way. Hunksy took a deep breath and whispered into the quiet night, "Thank you. I won't let you down." And as she walked away, she carried with her the memory of a kind old woman who had seen her worth when no one else had, who had given her a chance to start anew. Hunksy knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to try. One day at a time, just like the old woman had said. One day at a time. She decided to change the name of the diner to something more fitting, something that reminded her of who she was. She was biracial, a mix of her parents' worlds. It was the old woman who helped her come to terms with that. Hunksy smiled as she spoke the new name. Waffles and egg rolls.